Shall we begin?
Let's begin now.
Hi everybody, it's Lorraine, and today's project we will be using the following cartridges: the Storybook cartridge, the Flower Shoppe cartridge, and the Fancy Frames cartridge. So what will we be making today? We are going to be making an anniversary card, and this is our card that I've made for my mother-in-law and father-in-law for their 57th wedding anniversary. So come on and join me, and I'm going to show you how I made this card. Okay everybody, so I'm going to bring up my supplies so we can get started making the card. Now I saw this card, or something similar to this card, on a blog, and the blog was Creations by Lorraine, and I'll put a link in the description bar of the card that I saw. She does have a YouTube channel. I'm not quite sure, I don't remember what the YouTube channel is, but I will put a link to her channel down in the description bar as well. So my card is similar, but I did a little bit of changing on some things on the front of the card. So now, the card measures 10 inches by 7 inches, and then I've taken it and scored it in half to make it a 5 by 7 card. Now, Lorraine didn't give any measurements on her blog, so these are basically my measurements. And so next thing I want to do is I want to put down my next layer. And this layer measures, and I'm going to have to look at this, 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and this is going to lay right here. Now this cardstock here is some of the Recollections cardstock, and this cardstock right here is some of the Joann Fabric textured cardstock. So this is going to lay right here, and what I'm going to do is, because I'm not adding any ribbon, I'm going to take my ATG gun, and we're just going to go ahead and start putting down our layers. And I'm not inking any or all of the layers this time, because this is going to be several layers to this card. So I'm only inking some of the layers. Or actually, I'm only inking one layer. So I've got my tape on there, and I'm going to open up my card, and I'm going to lay down my first layer. And I'm going to line this up, and then I'm just going to press all the way around. So now what we'll do is we'll add the next layer, and this layer I did ink the edges, and I used the Tim Holtz Distress ink, and I used the pumice stone, and this piece of cardstock measures 4 1/2 by 6 1/2. Now this piece of cardstock, I don't remember where I got this. It's not a Recollections brand, it's not a Joann's brand. I probably picked this up at some scrapbooking show years ago. So we'll get some tape on here, and we're going to add this layer. So I'm going to move my card out the way for just a moment while I go ahead and get some tape on here. So we'll move this to the side, and we'll continue getting our tape all the way around. And then we can add this layer to our card. So, and then once again, we're going to take our card, and we're going to line up, and we're going to add our layer. And then I'm going to press down all the way around. So now, we're going to add our final layer. Now this piece of cardstock is some of the Indian handmade paper stack. And this is the Gold India stack, and I've used some papers out of here before, and I picked this up at Joann Fabrics. Now the one thing I want to point out is on here it says this paper is 5 by 7. That to me is incorrect, because It is 5 by 7, however, it's perforated along here, which means you're not really truly getting a 5 by 7. So keep that in mind when you're doing your measuring. It's not really 5 by 7. Unless you're going to put something over that perforated edge there. Then you can make it 5 by 7. So, I guess it really doesn't matter how we put this down. But this piece of cardstock measures 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. Now what I did to get all of my layers is I used my George and Basic Shapes cartridge just to line up the layers so I could see how it was going to look on the card. And I'm going to show you what that looks like on my Gypsy. So I kind of want to bring it up to the camera. I kind of just kept laying my layers out so I could measure out how I wanted them to be. And then this is basically how I designed my card. So what we'll do next is once again we'll take out the ATG gun and we'll get some tape all the way around and on our edges, and then we'll add this final layer to the card itself. And then we'll be done with adding layers. And then we can talk about what I use the Gypsy for, or the Cricut. So now I'm going to line this up and I'm going to try to get this as even as possible, because as you know, I don't like to measure. So I'm going to press that down. So now I am actually ready to add my frame. So I'm going to close up my card and we'll talk about our frame. So now this is my frame, and what I put inside is a picture of my mother-in-law and father-in-law, because this card is going to be for their 57th wedding anniversary. So to make this frame, I use the Fancy Frames Cricut cartridge, and the frame that I used was this frame right here. So now to lay this out on my Gypsy, because I needed it to fit within the square, the smallest square, I had to take off my aspect ratio button, and I actually put one on there that was 4.5 in height, and then I just continued to keep adjusting it till I could get it to fit within that square. So I also took and put the real dial size on. So the size of the frame, the top layer, is 3.5 in height and 4 3/4 in width. So I'm going to go to that cartridge real quick. So we want to go to the Fancy Frame, and it is key number 32, which looks like this. So you'll cut that at that height and width, and then the next one you want to cut, which is the layer underneath the frame. That is key number 32, and it looks like this. So now I'm not sure if I said that correctly. I think this is key 22, and then the other one is key 32. So you will cut key 22 and key 33. Make sure you take your aspect ratio button off and put on your real dial size and cut your width at 3.5 and your height at 4 3/4. Now when you cut this out, this is a very fine, intricate cut. So once again, what I did was I took my paper, and the paper that I used for my top layer came from a paper pack that I picked up at Walmart. It looks like this. Let's see if it has a name. Doesn't look like it has a name of any. Oh, it just says that it is neutrals, pattern paper pack neutrals, and these run about $5. So I just went ahead and cut me a small piece, and then to lay it out on my mat to make sure I could get the intricate cut, I sprayed my mat very well And I had one of my subscribers ask me, what do I use to spray my mats? It's this Crafter's Companion Stick and Spray Repositional Adhesive. Now, I picked this up at a rubber stamp show, but I do know that you can order it online. I've seen it on Amazon's website. And I also use the Stick Away, which is by Crafter's Companion. This is an adhesive cleaning agent, and this is what I use to clean my mats. So once I sprayed my mat very well with the Stick and Stay, I then took my brayer and ran it across the paper just so I could make sure that the paper would stick down and adhere properly, so when the Cricut began to cut, it would not pull up the paper. So I'm just going to, and what I've also done is I've added my bling already all the way around. And when your when your frame cuts out, it cuts out a smaller oval shape in here. So what I basically did was I printed the picture out on my printer, and then I took my Spellbinders die and die cut the picture, and then I just placed it on the back like so, and then I just kind of taped it down. So now I've got this popped up on some foam tape, so we're gonna just line our picture up here, and I'm gonna remove the foam tape, and then we're gonna add our picture to the card. So let me go and take all the foam tape off, or the foam backing, and then we'll just line up our picture like so and press down. So now we're ready to add our flowers and leaves on the side. So what I did to do this was I used my Flower Shoppe cartridge. Now Lorraine does say on her blog that she used the Flower Shoppe cartridge to cut her flowers, and I did cut my flowers, but I cut mine in different sizes just as she did, but I used different flowers when I did the cut. So I'm going to pull out my notes because I did cut quite a few flowers. But before we even add those, I want to add my leaves as well. So now for my leaves, what I used were my cherry Lin dies. And I'm going to bring these out and show you. What I like about the cherry Lin dies is when you go to die cut these, you actually get the veins in the leaves. And I really like that. So I went ahead and I cut each leaf that comes in the pack. And let me see if I can get those back in there real quick. And I cut them with some Recollections cardstock, and they ended up coming out like so. So they look like this, and as you can see, they do have the veins in the leaves. So once I had them all cut out, I then took my Yasutomo watercolor paints, which look like this, and I painted the cardstock so I could have just a little bit of a shine to the leaves. So my leaves, I'm just going to start laying them down how I want them. And then once we get them all down, I'm going to go back and we'll start gluing everything into place. So I'm going to bring this over just a little bit. And I'm going to put one in here. And then I'll probably stick one up along here. And I think we'll put one kind of down in. I think I want to put this big one in the middle. And then we'll put our two smaller leaves down here. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to glue these down, and then I'll come back and we'll add our flowers. Okay everybody, so I've added all of my leaves, and I'm now ready to add my flowers. So let's talk about the flowers. The flowers are from the Flower Shoppe cartridge. And I've cut them at various sizes, and I've used various flowers. So I'm basically going to go over what I used. I've cut the scallop 1, and I've cut the sunflower 1. I've cut the daisy, and then I've cut the exotic 1. So now the scallop 1 is on page 13, and I'm sorry, I did not cut the scallop 1. I cut the ruffle 1, and that is on page 15. And then the sunflower is on page 17, and then the daisy is on page 18. And the exotic 1 is on page 19. So I'm not going to go over what keys those are. You can look that up if you have the handbook, because you don't have to use your gypsy to cut these. So basically what I've done is I've gone ahead and cut out 2 of each size, and I've cut 1 1/2, 1 3/4, and 1 1/4. So I'm just going to lay them down for now in no particular order. I'm just putting them on the card. And then I'm going to glue them down. And once I have them all glued down, I'll be back. Okay, everybody, so I'm ready to add the last flower. So we'll get some glue on here, and we're just going to press it down. So now we have all of our flowers added. Now what I didn't talk about is the cardstock and everything that I used to make the flowers. I'm going to get some of these glue stragglers away because they're everywhere. So I'll get as many as I can away, and then I'll work on getting the rest of them away off camera. But what I did was I cut some of the cardstock that I had left over from the actual card. So this cardstock right here, which was Recollections. And then I took, after I had all of my flowers cut out, before I put them together, I used my Tim Holtz Distress inks to color the cards in the colors that I wanted. I'm sorry, to color the flowers in the colors that I wanted. And then I took my rubber stamp set by Stampin' Up. This is the Pocket Silhouettes. And I just stamped them with various distress inks. So the colors that I used were the Pumice Stone. I used the Gathered Twigs, the Walnut Stain, the Vintage Photo, the Brush Corduroy, and then I used the Going Gray by Stampin' Up. The other thing that I also used was my Copic markers. I colored some of the cardstock using those, and I used the Buttercup Yellow, which is Y21. I used the E00, which is Skin White, the E35, which is Chamois or Chamois, the E13, which is Light Suntan, and the E27 Africano, and then the last color is the R02, which is the Flesh. So I used the airbrush system again to airbrush some of the flowers as well as using the distress inks. So now the last thing that I want to add on here before I add just a little bit more bling is I went ahead and I cut out the number 57 to stand for their 57th wedding anniversary. And this is some of the cardstock that I used to make the bottom part of the frame. And I'm sorry I didn't say what that was. That is some Recollections cardstock. It is the Precious Metals. And I'm sorry for the glare. But that's what that cardstock is that the frame is made out of. So I used that as well to make the numbers. And the numbers were cut from I believe it was the storybook cartridge, and they look like this. And I cut each number. I took off my real dial size. I'm sorry, I put my real dial size on and I took my aspect ratio off. So each letter or number is, the width is 0.70 and the height is 1.66. And I just did that. I laid it out as 1.5 and then just kept adjusting it till I got to the size that I wanted. And then what I did was I took the two letters and welded them together. Or I keep saying letters. I took the two numbers and welded them together to get my 57. So let's add that to the card. I've gone and popped this up on the back with some of that tape that I have that's very thin. So I'm going to get the backing off, and then we can add the numbers to the card. And the other thing that I also did was I took some of the Yasutomo watercolor paints, and I actually cut two of the numbers, the 57s, and glued them together just so I could have a little bit more thickness like cardboard. And then I took the Yasutomo paints, watercolor paints, and just painted the numbers. So I'm going to line the 57 up right here and then press down. So now I just want to add maybe just a little bit more bling, and then I'll come back with the finished card. So that's it. This is my finished card. So rather than adding some more bling, because I already had bling going around the frame, I went ahead and added some pearls along the side here. So this is my finished card for my mother-in-law and father-in-law for their 57th wedding anniversary. Happy anniversary, Bob and Mary. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.